ready to talk hockey. Streaming from the Oilers Live Studio. Subscribe or follow today.
Hey, it's Michael here with another edition of Oilers Live Tuesdays. I've got two guests on tonight. I've got the secret professor, one of the hosts of Handkerchief Diaries. Is that right?
Diaries.
Dynasty. Wow.
I think you're confusing our show with the Motorcycle Diaries.
That's right. Well, hey, it's Handkerchief Dynasty. I knew that. And then I've also
it's late in Halifax. Michael thought he was doing a diary entry.
It's like
I don't know why you'd be confused by it, my friend. I mean, we only put together two completely random words in a haphazard, like improvised fashion.
That's
Handkerchief Dynasty in the sense that it's a hockey team that's made us cry a lot in the past, and we're hoping that those tears will soon turn to joy. That's why if you search us on Google Podcasts or wherever, you'll see the image of Wayne Gretzky crying.
That's
because,
right.
You know,
that's right.
This is a franchise born of pain, my friends.
Born of pain. And then my other guest is Mr. Dash himself from Straight Off the Pipe podcast, joining me again. I think my most frequent guest now. So welcome, guys. Welcome. And sorry to cut you off, Mr. Professor.
No, not at all. I mean, I was just going to say, like, hopefully that pain turns to joy at one point, like at the end of War and Peace, where, like, because the main character's been through all this crap, he just appreciates life more. Like, if the Oilers go on some runs here, and these two games are a nice start to going on a little run to save the season here, the pain will give way to the most profound, undefinable joy. But no need to apologize for interrupting me. I mean, you had to intro the show. Sorry for stepping on your intro.
Hey.
I'll just turn it over to Dash, though. Let's go.
No, well, Dash, I mean, tell me, how'd you come up with Straight Off the Pipe, Dash? I mean, we got Handkerchief Dynasties, but Straight Off the Pipe sounds kind of lame now, doesn't it?
Based on the story I was just hearing from Isaac, I think he's the one that's straight off the pipe. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think I might be. Yeah, I do live adjacent to the downtown east side. Actually, that's a funny thing. You want to hear a bit of a dirty story that's like kind of fucked up and embarrassing?
All
right, start us off.
You do live a block from Hastings. Let's go.
Yeah, I live a block from Hastings in Vancouver, which is, if you know Vancouver, you know something about that. It's downtown. It's like, I think the building was just sold to these like evil real estate investors for like 50 million or whatever. But it's in just next to the shitty part of the town. I'm downstairs really late at night, kind of an ungodly hours, probably like 3 a.m., smoking a cigarette. And this guy comes up to me. He's like, "Sir, can I borrow your lighter?" And when you're smoking and someone asks to borrow your lighter, sometimes it can be hard to say no because you obviously have a lighter, you know? So the guy fucking takes my lighter and then kind of like does something. He's like, takes his jacket out, and then clearly I realize he's fucking smoking something out of some goddamn pipe or something. Yeah. And then he like takes off with my lighter and I'm like, fuck. And then I kind of like yell at him. I kind of like yell some expletives, like, you know, F you or whatever. But I'm also like at this point kind of scared. I'm just like, I didn't get the fuck out of here. Like, get back up to my apartment, which is like totally overpriced, Vancouver downtown. So I'm not on the pipe, but I'm well aware of the consequences of going on the pipe, living in the neighborhood I do, which is, kids, I'm just going to tell you one thing: don't do drugs.
Yeah.
Just talk about doing drugs. You can look cool. Don't actually do them.
Talk all you want about doing drugs, right? That's
what's the harm in that?
That's our PSA for today. I'm glad that we got that out of the way. You know,
I thought he was speaking directly to Ken Holland about the Keith deal. Actually, was that directed to everybody?
I mean, I'm speaking directly to Ken Holland because, like, on the day where he like took the job to be Oilers GM, which in some ways I think he was never fully like prepared for what he was like taking on. I don't think anyone really can be, you know. He might have been just off the pipe that day, you know, and pissed off from being kind of elbowed out in Detroit or something. I still think he's one of the best GMs we've had in recent memory, but if this season has done one thing other than completely play with my emotions in a real messed up and sadistic and cruel way, it's shown that, you know, maybe a new approach sans Ken Holland might be in the future, and that might be a good page for the franchise and the organization to turn at some point.
Look, it's Michael's fault for bringing both you and I on this episode at the same time, because he's not going to get another word in for about 40 minutes.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm sorry to be such a downer after a fucking awesome comeback win
Well,
it's just,
we're going to start talking about Holland. We can get in there if you want. That's cool. I just think that, guys, if we're going to compare him and make him one of the better GMs, it's when you're comparing someone to Tambellini and Chiarelli. That's not that tough to do.
Yeah. It's the same. Yeah. It's the same way where people say, oh, they're the best X on the Oilers. They're the Oilers' best defenseman, the Oilers' best, winger or whatever. And it's like, well, yeah, but like, what's the sample that you're comparing? For sure. Like Tambellini, Chiarelli, McTavish, Holland, they're all kind of about the same in a weird way. Maybe it's not the GM necessarily that was the problem all those years.
Okay, well, guys, we're going to get into that because I think this is a good topic of conversation. But let's talk about the Oilers' win tonight.
For sure.
In OT. Offline, Dash said he had a feeling in his gut that the Oilers were going to come back and win it. I, on the other hand, had considered turning off the TV for the third period, if not that I knew that we were going to come in and do a live stream tonight.
I'll tell you what I turned off before the third period, and this has actually been part of my my pregame checklist before every Oilers game for about the last month. Is I make sure you procure your accoutrement, your snacks, and your drinks and whatnot. But one thing I've been doing, which has really been helpful, is becoming emotionally unavailable, making sure that I become emotionally unavailable before the game.
Yeah.
So that as I'm watching it, there's less torture involved, because obviously they're going to get scored on first. We just know that that's a given. The games they lose, the games they win, this is just a team that gets scored on first. I think at this point we've over-fixated on it to the point where it's become kind of like a wormhole or like a quantum singularity. And we're kind of like, it's dangerous.
I said
I don't want to talk about it anymore, but the third period, therefore, having become emotionally unavailable and having actually left in the period break to go and procure a half Mickey of Canadian Club whiskey, which is the whiskey you get when you cheer for a Canadian club that's breaking your heart.
Yeah.
And then in the third period, they tied it up and then they win it in OT. And I'm just like, I don't know what to feel. I haven't even caught up to how I'm supposed to feel. What a great comeback win. I love this team. I love these guys. I'm cheering like hell for them through thick and thin. I don't care. And I'm just grateful that we can look in the rearview mirror and look at 2 wins after not looking at 2 wins in a row for a long fucking time. Let's be honest, guys.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, the last time we won a game, we won 2 in a row. All right, Dash, what's your give me your thoughts on the game story tonight.
Game story. We were coming off that win, I guess, against the Flames, and for some reason, it had that same type of feeling coming. There's the 2-0 deficit, and it's not like I felt that way against the Flames, but coming off of that win and into this game, I think that, there's only a few guarantees in life, boys. There's death, taxes. We give up the first goal, and we make the other goalie look like George Vezina. I think I tweeted out before the game that we would find a way to do so. And we've got their 16th string goalie. And what did we pepper them with? 47 shots, high grade scoring chances on natural stat trick were 30-18. It just felt that it was gonna come. I don't know. It just you could see a couple of shifts where Dry and McDavid kind of put it on their back. And even with about 3 minutes left there, McDavid had a chance. And I thought, he's going to do it again. And it didn't quite get there, but I don't know. It just had that feel for me. Like it was, I guess I'm just used to being scored on first and that we're going to have to chase the game, but this felt like a different chase.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Your thoughts, Mr. Professor? Game story for tonight.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, the whole getting scored on first thing, even though we were playing pretty well and getting chances and not getting rewarded, it's one of those things that's just getting kind of insane just to have to hold in one's mind by oneself. Unless you're sitting on a couch next to another person, we can be like, it's crazy how we get scored out first every time, even though we're getting all these great chances. I felt like as the game went on, they just started to play really gritty and they started to play really hard. And they were getting shots on net when they had clear opportunities to, and there were a lot of rebounds and second chances. I mean, Bouchard on the power play is a really interesting story because, he's still new there. This is really his second game in that role, from the beginning of the game. And even though he wasn't getting it through, obviously, as much as he did when he scored 2 goals in 4 minutes last game, there was a lot of chaos created from those point shots from him. And it's going to be interesting to see how those players evolve in like reading each other and playing off each other, because after the last game, you could see that the players were deferring to him this power play already. They were just like, okay, give Bouchard the puck, let him fucking try and shoot it from the point. I think I only saw a couple of them blocked, but it was like he was a focal point of the power play, probably like maybe even too much so. But I think it'll be interesting to see how that develops. And as I was emotionally unavailable, and was kind of like cut off and like glass-eyed the whole time. But like as I was watching that, I was like, well, when I go on Oilers Live later, I can say one positive is Bouchard in the power play looks interesting and looks like it's going to be a bit of a story going forward.
Yeah.
And like, don't be surprised. There's teams that would acquire Barrie if it really comes to that. So I don't think we all need to freak out about it too much.
Yeah, I don't know why anybody would freak out about it. I mean, it's like for the past, couple of years, everybody's been, like a lot of people outside of management in the Oilers organization have been writing Barrie off. So, there's not, from a fan base, I'd say,
not me.
No, yeah. I mean,
no, handkerchief dynasty as a whole have been firmly in the Barrie camp because there's such confirmation bias whenever people look at his defensive lapses. I mean, of course he has defensive lapses and that's not the strength of his game. But when you watch the game with that in your mind already, you're just going to see it so much more. And that shit happens to every fucking defenseman.
Well, to that point,
tonight,
look at Bouchard. Bouchard was awful defensively tonight. I mean, he could have been on for 4 against. He was horrendous. And
he's a young guy.
It looked like he was trying to get like the over/under on that one down low, and he he did everything in his power, but Vancouver couldn't score. My thoughts on the game, guys. I wasn't as hopeful. Dash. I like, first off, this first goal thing is ridiculous. I put out a tweet at some point tonight to say, why don't we just, spitballing, but hear me out. Why don't we just go and score the first goal right off the opening draw? That way we get it out of the way and we can play our game, right? Like, it's that bad that if we don't let them score the first goal until the second period's almost over, that gives us not as much time to come back and win the game, right? Like it's like the game doesn't game doesn't start till the other team scores, and I don't know, like the kind of mental block that's there for that to happen. I just don't understand it. But for the first time tonight,
actually, now I think I'm starting to.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead, though.
Yeah, but for the first time tonight, and maybe the first time in his career, I legit thought that we saw Connor McDavid in a slump when he missed that open net, and then they went and scored on the shorthanded goal.
Yeah.
Like my heart sank. It didn't sink because we were down 2-0. It sank because McDavid started to look human the last few games, right? And
well, I mean, here's the headline: McDavid is actually a human being. As much as we worship him as a demigod, I know it's shocking as it sounds.
He's
as
never
much as
gone,
he's like a Michael Phelps playing hockey like esque freak of nature who's just like
but he's
God's
never gone
gift to the
this long.
sport.
He's never gone.
He is
this
in fact a
long
human being. We should probably
actually performing, right? And so when he did that tonight, which was that's like his that's money for him, right? Like those kind of goals are money for him, and for it, and it wasn't just the fact that he missed the empty net. Well, he didn't miss the empty net. It was a good defensive play, but it wasn't the fact that he missed the opportunity. To top that off, they went down and scored on the shorthanded goal, right? And so I just, like, to me, that's what deflated me was this whole McDavid thing, and like I've never felt like he had a monkey on his back. But then, McDavid does McDavid things sometimes, and he goes and he changes that, in overtime. But he's looked on occasion over the past 4, 5, 6 games like, he's on a roller coaster of energy level, right? Like he'll come out for, a full period where he looks like he's going to score 20 and he doesn't score. then he kind of, he looks, I know he's human, but he looks a little bit more human, on other occasions. And frankly, that was, to me, that was the game story tonight. And then if McLeod hadn't scored the blooper, well, this game would have been over. And that was kind of, what we needed. But Draisaitl, we talk about McDavid so much. And Draisaitl's been, without Draisaitl, this team would be nothing over the past, 3-4 games. Like the guy,
100%.
The guy is
100%.
unbelievable. Yeah.
No, Draisaitl's like once in a lifetime, once in a generation talent, and person too. And he's also a human being. I mean, if they score 0.75 points per game, we're all just like, oh, like what's up? But for like other caliber players, other tiers of players, one would never necessarily say that. But there's just such lofty expectations with players of that level. I was so happy to see McLeod. Speaking of like because we always talk about the top two, and I think that's actually one thing we need to do less of, because we need a team. We don't need the best two players in the world. We need a fucking team. Pardon my French. That can have the two best players in the world. But like, I got to be honest, like this is a really important season for the Edmonton Oilers. Like if they don't make a run of it, I mean, we're going to start thinking about like whether the two best players in the world are going to want out at some point if the rest of the organization can't get it together. And I really like McLeod. I see a really bright future for him. I loved his goal. I loved his moxie. I mean, he played with some grit in the third period. I felt like
he's getting better every game. There's no doubt. Yeah. He's getting to be an NHLer every game, and it's just coming along. Like he's the kind of guy, he's what you expected. He's kind of what you'd hope they'd start to develop last year. But again, right, like, we've talked about it so much on here, which is, Tippett doesn't want to play the rookies, right? But he's had to play McLeod this year, and McLeod's come, he's showing everybody what they want. Dash is gone. I don't know what happened to Dash, but he's gone.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you one thing. I got a lot more time for giving forwards, particularly wingers, some minutes as rookies as opposed to defensemen. Like I think one organizational flaw, or at least like sticking point, a sticky wicket, as they would say in cricket, organizationally is we have several young, interesting defensemen. Bouchard would be at the top of the list, obviously, followed by Broberg. You probably put Samorukov. There's other guys in that mix. But defensemen take so long to develop. It's such a difficult game to play as a defenseman that it might take Evan Bouchard 3 or 4 or 5 years to fill out his game and continue to improve. Like the runway for a young, talented defenseman to improve his game is like 5 years once they become a regular. Darnell Nurse has gotten better every single year, and he's just transitioning now from a young, talented blue chip defenseman to, a fully fledged veteran graybeard. Basically, he's like one of the few kind of almost like graybeard guys on the team outside of a couple of other guys. And it might, like, if we think we're going to go in next year with Bouchard and Broberg, without also adding or tweaking the defense, I'm not sure if that's going to be super successful. Like you need to give players enough runway to prove themselves and develop their game without giving them too much. And we're a fan base and a franchise that has seen the consequences of giving young players too much ice time before they were ready. And we wonder what would have happened if we actually had let so-and-so or so-and-so.
I'm of two minds of that, though, right? Like, to me, that's like, yeah, you can let guys percolate, but at the same time, you guys got to play when they got to play, right? Like, it's not about letting people, everybody wants to use this term over-ripen all the time, right? Did anybody let, McDavid over-ripen in the AHL? No.
Well, he's an exception.
Because he's
that
McDavid,
kind of proves the rule,
right?
In a way. He's McDavid.
Well,
those first overall guys are
but
usually
my
in a little bit
point
of a different category.
is every situation is going to be unique in and of itself, right? Like there's not going to be any, there's no formula that makes a hockey player, right? Look at, and then on the flip side, if you want to talk about the over-ripening rule, you look at Cale Makar, right? Like he he spent some time out, and he comes in and he's absolutely outstanding, right? Like he didn't have to come right away and do that. Nurse took some time to develop. Defensemen do take time to develop, but at the same time, you got to play players, when they're ready to play. Like it's not so simple just to say, well, they're young, so let's put them in the AHL. Some guys, some guys need to get out and play. Last year, I think was a opportunity missed with Bouchard. We basically sat him for a whole year. For what? Because that's what the formula says. I mean, it didn't really suit us anything to to have that.
I mean, I don't think they would have done it if it wasn't for COVID to a certain extent. At least that's my question there. Like, would Bouchard have just played in the AHL that season if it wasn't for this shittier version of 12 Monkeys that the whole world's living through? Like at least 12 Monkeys, we had the oozing charisma of Bruce Willis, the beauty of Madeline Stowe, the brilliant direction and vision and mise en scene, I think is the term, of Terry Gilliam. Possibly one of the most, possibly the most talented of the Monty Pythons. But I got to welcome Dash back. Dash, we lost you there for a while. Were you just like, did you need time to collect your feelings after this topsy-turvy game?
I may or may not have had some video issues, but my feelings are definitely hurt. That's what it came down to, for sure.
You've still got video issues there.
Your mic sounds different too. It's okay.
Yeah, I had to switch. Switch devices.
You can't do anything. You can't put a filter on or something.
It's really weird though, because like this game, I mean, where the season has gone to such shit in terms of the Oilers going from feast to famine and being like seemingly a good team, maybe getting a little lucky, to being like 32 in like a number of categories over a month period of time. So every game now is kind of a microcosm of the season where you're watching the game and you're like, okay, well, we got to win this game, where like the fucking season is looking like it's in jeopardy. So after the second period, I was already being like, okay, well, maybe the season isn't going to go that great. And then we come back and win. It's going to take me at least another 18 to 26 hours to accept that the Oilers are still potentially in the run of this. And if they win the third game, watch out, boy. Because like this team has been primed, I think, for a run for a while, and I think they still have it in them. So, Godspeed.
So, like, I'd like to unpack that. Dash, I mean, is that the way you look at it? Like, do you think this team is primed for a run?
Man, I don't know. Do you have to ask me this live, bro?
I mean, with a goalie, I mean, we have the primer. It's like when you're painting a house and you just have the primer on, but without the second coat. Like, we still need the goalie to finish the primer layer.
Home renos.
You got to prime. People that don't prime should be like locked up. There should be like a minimum 6-month jail sentence for not priming when you're painting a fucking house, or like anything really. You got to prime. It's got to sand too. People don't appreciate that enough.
So we've got some comments online. We've got a couple of people watching on Twitch. Warriors Oilers says, oh geez, I missed a lot here. Holland didn't solve our main problem, goaltending and forward depth, and he had salary cap to work with. And defensemen taking a long time to develop makes the Reinhart trade even worse. Shannon on Facebook, Dash's biggest fan, so he thinks, says shouldn't have went to OT. Pettersson goal was something you'd see in midget.
It was through the legs. I mean, CC didn't look amazing on it, I'll tell you that much. I mean, but CC's got several get out of jail free cards in terms of just coming in and being like decent. I'll be honest, the defense is a big worry for me. I mean, goaltending, yes, definitely number one issue. But like, guys, we have like a really weirdly constructed defense right now.
Yeah, defense wasn't bad tonight, though. Like, defense wasn't our problem tonight.
But like the ceiling for our defense is like a little more middling than I think we're all prepared to accept at this point. Like,
oh yeah, absolutely. When like the only people worried that our our defensemen wouldn't clear waivers, we're Oilers fans, right? Like, it's you got a guy that
I'm not sure anyone was worried.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people thought he'd get picked up, and the fact is, I mean, most of the defensemen on our team would clear waivers. That's the challenge we have right now.
I mean, it's a challenge to acquire NHL ready, top 4 minute ready defensemen. It's one of the hardest positions to play, I think, in all of professional sports. No question, hands down. And like in some cases, it's not even close. Like being an NHL defenseman, I can't even imagine what goes through one's mind trying to be that person. Like it's an extremely difficult position to play. And, when I look back at the Duncan Keith acquisition, I think, well, Kenny Holland probably looked at, one of the things a good general manager does is they avoid as much attrition as possible. They avoid losing the good players they have as much as possible. And he did a really good job of signing Nuge. I love the number. I love the Nuge forever. But it really fucking blows that we lost Adam Larson. And that's a case of attrition where you just, like in the Republican armies of Napoleonic France, there's a certain number of soldiers that just desert or die or leave, and they just don't have those soldiers anymore. And you got to replace them. You got to train new soldiers, or you got to hire some mercenaries. And he probably looked at the free agent crop and he thought, well, the only pretty good defenseman I really have a chance at is Cody Ceci, who's pretty good, but fuck, man. And he was like, well, I guess I should get Keith. And people will malign it. I mean, the cap number sucks. But we gave up Caleb Jones, who's still looks to be somewhat of a bubble player. No disrespect to him. I love him. He was a good soldier for us. I don't know, man. But the defense is just a question mark. I still think Duncan Keith is going to voluntarily retire and just go and coach his son's hockey team or some shit. Because why the fuck would he want to stay another year?
Why the fuck would he want to stay? And why does there's no way that Holland didn't get. There's not a person on earth that didn't sit and say that Holland didn't use his leverage and Holland didn't, make the right deal. And I almost wonder if there isn't just something we don't know. And if the fact is Keith's hey man, I'm going to retire at the end of this year. I'll go over to BC. And then Holland knows that cap space is going back to Chicago next year. Then maybe that deal makes a little more sense. You
Guaranteed.
Talk about giving up Caleb Jones, whatever. I appreciate Caleb. I love everything he did. Great. That's not even the issue. It's the fact that we paid him full price. But the part that's bothering me more and more in the situation that we're in is the fact that he tied up our second and third round pick. By making those picks frozen in not knowing which one it was going to be because they're conditional, it really handcuffs in us being able to make a deal when we need to make one right now.
The conditional draft pick is the collateralized debt obligation of hockey. It's it should be really abolished. It's really volatile and difficult to manage and kind of insane that that's even a thing. I mean, supposedly when they signed the new CBA, whatever, after COVID to get back playing again, I heard there was people talked about, they're doing away with conditional picks. But the fact that the Oilers' hands are tied in terms of really, really needing 1 or 2 or 3 good pieces to add by or before the trade deadline, and they can't do it because of these bullshit conditional picks, goes to show how insane it is that that's even a thing. We didn't have conditional picks up until very recently, the same way they didn't have the fucking Department of Homeland Security or what are they called? ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. One of the worst named law enforcement organizations. And I respect people in law enforcement. I respect people that are able to say the words law enforcement with respect. People that have worked in law enforcement know what that means. And, people listening that are in law enforcement will understand what I say that. But ICE, they really should call it something else.
So look, if it was a conditional second, I mean, Holland's not going to trade a second anyway. So what does it really matter? He's not going to trade that now. He's basically, he's after his presser, he said he's looking at the future, right? He's going to develop the team. He's a development guy, right? So that pick has, to me, it's of little consequence based on Holland's strategic direction with this team, which, everybody, nobody really fully knows right now. I mean, Holland's idea right now is that he's got to find something at no cost, right? And so,
Michael, are you saying that you think that it's irrelevant that he gave a pick because he wouldn't have traded anyways?
I think it's awful.
Because,
I think it's awful. I'm just saying, it's not worth
Holland
discussing about
picks, man. He gave out 2 second picks for Anthony Ciu. He gave out second picks for Mike Green.
Yeah, but he said he's not going to do it now, right? Like, this is not his thing.
He doesn't have a choice whether he can do it or not, Mike.
You and I agree.
I agree. I agree with Dash on this one. Yeah, at a certain point, you have no choice because this isn't a team that can just shit the bed another season and get a top 5 pick.
Exactly.
Like that's over. If that's not over, why? I'm sorry, and I apologize.
We all
for the
agree
French,
on that. We all agree on that.
Why the fuck wouldn't David
choice,
Draisaitl stay?
But
why would they
he's
fucking stay?
Do it, right?
If this team shits the bed on this season, it's the precursor to those guys leaving. And I'm sorry. That's the kind of shit that's going to take us all 5 to 10 years to get over it, my friends. So if we miss the playoffs by like 10 or 20 points this year, and I'm saying I still have hope. I think we can go on a little run here. I'm looking forward to win number 3, please and thank you. The clock is ticking.
I'm not saying that he can't, that he won't. I'm saying he can't.
Yeah, I know he can't. I know he can't.
Totally.
What I'm saying, and I think we're all kind of arguing a little bit of the same thing, right? Is what I'm saying is he's not going to, right? Like he said he wouldn't do that, right? Like he doesn't want to mortgage any of the future of this organization for a goalie.
Doesn't matter whether he said he would or wouldn't or not. He can't legally. He can't.
Yeah, no,
I know, but
because
it's frozen. Like, I don't understand. Like, he gives up seconds all the time. He gives up seconds for nothing.
Well, my whole point is we're talking about something that really is academic anyway, right? Like he wasn't going to do it, and he can't do it. So, whether or not it's like it was a shitty deal.
I disagree. I think if he had his second round pick, he would use it. I think he would be dangling that right now. I think he has to. He doesn't want to give up the first round pick. It was still a shitty deal,
and we agree on that.
Yeah, of course. But makes it worse. It makes it incredibly worse because we're handcuffed as a result.
I think we're totally handcuffed, and I think someone said I can't remember. I think it was Mike. He's trying to acquire something for no cost, which, if people were able to do that, I got news for you. The whole economy of the world would be different. I mean, it's almost like such an old school way of thinking. It's like when you go and acquire overseas colonies and just pull the fucking minerals out of the earth with like people's bare hands and then ship it back to Spain. Like Kenny Holland is an old school GM. And I do want to give him credit though, because I really feel as though he did stop the bleeding organizationally with this writhing about and just looking for, like, I don't know if you guys remember, but literally every year there was a new prospect that was going to be the savior. There was a new prospect who was the prospect that year who was going to come in and make a difference. And every year we had a new prospect that sometimes would come in and be good. Sometimes would be come in and be pretty good, like Sam Gagne or someone like that. But a lot of years, they would wilt under the lights. You know what I mean? And he stopped the bleeding in the sense of we got to be a little more reserved with bringing guys up and be a little more willing to play players in the AHL a little bit more. And I think Bouchard's probably benefited from that. And I think other players in the organization have probably benefited from that. But we do need a new GM who can bring new ideas and not kind of just do things like Ken Holland is doing. I mean, he's not winning trades. The Oilers are a team and an organization that need to win some trades to have a chance, given everything working against them. I mean, forget COVID, that's the funny thing about Ken Holland's tenure. The first year of COVID was the year he really bet on the team going deep in the playoffs. He was like, okay, fuck it. I'm all in. Mike Green, Athanasiou, let's go. I think Kulikov as well, right? And that's going to go down in history. Brendan Manning. That's going to go down in history. That was Chiarelli, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But that's going to go down in history as the worst possible time in NHL history to go all into the deadline and trade futures for players, because Mike Green played 6 games. Yeah, again, we all turned into extras in a shittier version of 12 Monkeys without the charismatic performance of Bruce Willis and Madeline Stowe. Oh, and a great supporting performance by Brad Pitt. If I do recall correctly, that was actually a bit of a signpost in the career of Brad Pitt, where people are like, oh, Brad Pitt's actually a pretty good actor. Did you see him in 12 Monkeys? like it was the shittiest time to go all in. And he probably didn't really know that was going to happen. I don't think anyone had any way of knowing. It was mostly just unlucky, but we don't have any of that stuff now. You know what I mean? And he's just not winning trades. And this team needs a GM who's able to win trades against all odds. I really don't see us being viable without that. It's a sad fact.
Well, they haven't even looked for a GM that will win trades, right? Like that's not the kind of guy they were looking for. Ken Holland, right? Like this is, it's been the argument for a long time, right? That we're moving guys too fast in the organization. So when Ken Holland became available, I mean, he was a natural choice for this team, right?
Totally. And I really think he did actually stop the bleeding. I mean, he stopped the bleeding by trading away Milan Lucic, which I'll always say that just had to happen. That was the first step on a journey to turning things around.
Oh yeah,
that roster that was that
I got
that
Flames fan friends that say that's a win for Calgary. I say it's a win-win.
Sure, you can argue. You can argue that.
I'd say it's a win-win. I say,
but he's also
we had to get rid of him, right?
Who has he had the entire time he's been GM at the Edmonton Oilers as well? Mikko Koskinen, a goalie who is a really good person. I really think the team is behind him and cheering for him. I think we're all cheering for him. We appreciate the work he's done, but when the NHL is like being at war. It's pure competition. It's like war without all the horrible things the war actually entails. It's kind of like a bullshit war with no consequences. Whereas war itself is actually like totally horrific, but like these teams are in competition with each other. So if you're the 31st or 30th or 32nd best goaltender in the NHL, starting goaltender, that's just something that you're going to be, it's unfortunate. It's difficult. It's emotionally draining for everyone involved. But that's kind of like he's had that Mikko contract the whole time. So he's been unable to basically trade that for anything other than something insane. There's some team that has asked him to take on something insane or acquire something insane to get rid of Mikko. But he's just also an old school GM who has a lot of merit. I think he's a good hockey man in the sense of like those people from that generation are good hockey men. But like, damn, if this team is not like crying out for they should make fucking Tyler Dellow the GM of the Oilers. Oh, like, I don't fucking care. Did you guys ever read Tyler Dellow? I think he works for the Devils.
Yeah.
Tyler Dellow for GM should be the name of this episode because like, that's what they need. They need someone who does not give a fuck and is going to actually apply every possible strategy they can that's cutting edge and contemporary and not based on kind of cliches and tribal knowledge of things that have worked for a really long time. So we're not going to change them. Like the old hockey mentality is like feudalism. It's sure it was better than what came before, but what comes after?
Yeah. I mean, you're not a Dello fan, but I mean, there are guys that have done that, gone to organizations, and tried to change the world and how they did it.
Isn't that what Chaika did? In Arizona?
That's what I was going to say. Chaika is one. And look at our guys here to the east of Edmonton in Toronto, right? Like, he's all in. And they still haven't made it past the first round.
But Toronto's too far.
He's made a hell of a team, a regular season team, but he's not made a playoff team. So
Toronto's taken it way too far. Like so many of Dubas's moves are just like way over the top that it's just like, okay, dude, like that's too much. Like Marlowe. There's numerous examples, kind of just like having a super top heavy roster, giving out tons of money to the star forwards, like.
Yeah, but I mean, Bunting.
Like I'm not saying
who saw
Dello
Bunting
per
happening,
se.
right? Like, but my point is, right? You need somebody, a little bit in the middle, right? Like, there are guys that are, both really good traditional hockey guys that understand the power of analytics, and if you don't get somebody that's firmly in the middle of that. Then you're doomed to fail both ways. You're doomed to fail the way the Oilers are. Like they've got to be. And I can't say for sure because I don't have any ties directly into the organization. But everything that ever comes out of there is that they've got one of the worst analytics departments. In fact, that guy used to be the radio host there. That's on Twitter. He said his comment was that he had some insight into their analytics, and they'd be better off just looking at Dom's report on The Athletic, right? Like, it's that bad in the Oilers organization. Right, and they need somebody halfway, right? They need somebody halfway.
Totally,
but it's got to be an
100%
organizational
agree.
thing too, right? Like when people say get rid of Bobby Nix, like that's part of it, right? Like it's got to be an organizational thing. Right?
I'm really skeptical on Bobby Nix because, and it's really come into full 2020 view recently, given that we just played Florida and the Florida GM who's done some really great things with that team and is kind of that guy in the middle you're referring to, was being interviewed by the organization at the time. And then as soon as Kenny Holland became available, Bobby Nicholson was just like, oh, fuck yeah, Kenny Holland, let's go. Fuck all these other people. Like we lost out on that guy because we trusted, the steady hand who, I kind of feel the same way about Dave Tippett. It's like, if Dave Tippett was a contractor and came to your house and was building some stairs, Dave Tippett would build those stairs properly. He'd build those stairs right. You could trust Dave Tippett. He's old school. He believes in the work. He's legit, which, to be honest, if you ever hired a contractor, is actually a really rare thing. Like you'd be calling that person all the time if you met that guy. And think of Kenny Holland the same way, but it's like analytics beyond just the analytics. It's like for a Canadian franchise of any kind, of any of the Canadian franchises, even just beyond the Oilers, for any of them to win the cup, they need to be thinking outside the box and kind of having almost like a Mao Zedong total war strategy, where they're just doing everything they can in every fucking crazy way to overcome the inherent disadvantages of being a Canadian franchise, which are numerous. There's numerous disadvantages facing not only the Oilers, but everyone else in a league where it's, it's a game of attrition. We're just, even if we get better, if we're not getting better as fast or faster than the other teams are getting better, we're fucked.
Hey, guys, this leads me into something I've been wanting to talk about for a little while, and we don't have a lot of time left. We'll go probably about another 15 minutes. But
no, let's go forever.
And most nights we could. A lot of times, and recently of late, right? Like, and Oilers fans are always under the gun for being, quote unquote, toxic fans. They talk about, players coming here being really under the microscope. I went and watched, right now the NFL playoffs are going on. I've watched, the playoffs. There are guys, and the NBA is the same, NFL, NBA, Major League Ball. Like, there are guys that gravitate to the markets where fans are there, right? Where fans are out there and talking to them and criticizing them. And that's where the guys want to be, right? Like they want to go where fans care about them. Who's the guy? He was a GM before, and he's on Stauffer's show quite often.
Brian Lawton.
Yeah, Brian Lawton. Brian Lawton said he hated it in Tampa when he was in Tampa because, nobody cared, right? Like nobody cared that he had he was there during a little bit of a depression, and nobody cared what he did with the team, and he said it made it hard, right? And so what is it about hockey players, right, that this has become a thing, right? That if we talk about McDavid or we talk about Koskinen, that it's a thing, right? Like there are guys that today we're talking about the Elks offline. Victor Cui gets on. He's the new president and CEO, and he's on. He was on Jesperson, and he says, "I don't look at it as criticism. I look at it as people care, right? Like that. It's when they stop talking that I've got something to worry about." And frankly, right, like if you're winning, it's not criticism anymore. It's, right, like it's other things, but the franchise isn't winning. So it seems like criticism, and it is criticism. Let's be real. I guess I don't want to, that's what it is. But people care. Like Oilers fans care. So what is it about hockey fans that's a big deal, that people want to get out of that kind of environment? Or is that just, maybe that's Eastern media trying to find another way to put down the Edmonton Oilers organization and something. I think some of that stems from some jealousy over all the first round picks, and then the history of having, Gretzky and Messier and Coffey and all of those things. I think there's, whether they'll admit to it or not, there's a ton of jealousy there, right? And there always will be, right? And getting those first round picks didn't matter, but what is it with hockey players? Like, is that legit? Do they care that, they're under the gun here, like under the microscope? Do you think Connor McDavid gets up and
I feel like you should go
care?
first, Dash.
I think it depends on the player. We're all built a little differently. I think there's some people that don't read the internet. I think there's some people that don't read the comments and stay off Twitter. And I think there's others that are, completely, engulfed with it and completely, like you listen to Joaquin Gage talk about it, and he said he used to look all the time, and it was hard. And he got to a point where he would only look after good games because he was hoping somebody would say something nice. But there's clearly smoke where there's fire. Like where there's smoke, there's fire. Pardon me. And Larson left town, Bear left town, Pronger left town, Pekka left town. I don't know. There's something to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, like I've mentioned before, the things working against the Canadian franchises. And I mean, for people that live in Edmonton who are listening, I think sometimes I just think if it wasn't fucking minus 35 outside, guys, and players didn't have to eat shit from the fan base whenever things went bad, like it would be one thing if it was minus 35 outside and the fan base was generally behind you and amicable and there was comedy between the two of you. But when it's minus 35 and they're just like, wow, like you suck, and we're going to point out all the ways you suck, and we're going to question and speculate on all the things that are wrong with things constantly. It's a thing. And I think Dash, you were saying I think you used a phrase like a different kind of person or a different kind of player. I think one of the things they need to do in this kind of total war effort to turn over every stone, and something I think they did with Zach Hyman, is find a different kind of player, a different kind of person who actually appreciates what the kind of like spiritual and social and cultural and sports ceiling is, what the ceiling is of being the Oilers when they're successful. Because that's a wild ride. Like you said, Lawton said it was a total drag when people just didn't give a shit, right? So you need to find a Zach Hyman, and he is a different kind of, he's a different kind of player. I'll tell you that thing. Like, I'll tell you one thing, like the way he plays the game, the way he battles for the puck, the way he protects the puck, the way he's on top of the puck at all times is a wonder to behold. But he's also a different kind of person. He's a children's author. To be a children's author, you're taking time out of your day to think about a way to tell an interesting and uplifting and enlightened story to people that are under 10. And you're devoting yourself to that effort just to kind of help people and explore what it means to do that for someone else. And Zach Hyman is a special kind of player, and they need to continue to find more players that are resilient to the fucking, it's like the Lord of the Rings. Like only certain hobbits are resilient against the evil of the Ring of Power. There's only certain players that are resilient to the microscope. Like it's the microscope of microscopes. The only one that's bigger is Toronto. And I think that's why Dubas has gone off the rails sometimes in his moves. But like if you find players that don't mind the microscope and can appreciate what it's like to be on that team when they're winning and when they're going deep in the playoffs, a la 2006, which is a long time ago, but still feels fresh. Honestly, if we can go on a run here, the playoffs are still very much in consideration. And if we can make the playoffs, and if Kenny Holland can defy expectations and actually win a couple of fucking trades before the deadline here, the season will not only be saved, but we'll appreciate the success so much more, having gone through the kind of Dante's Inferno-esque hell of December and most of January up to this point.
Yeah, the challenge for me anyway is, we've been going through this for so long to be at this point where we're talking about if we're making the playoffs. That's a failure in and of itself.
Oh no, it's like being 2 years into a marriage and having agreed that, she would no longer go ski doing with her ex on your birthday. And it just happens. It still happens like for the third year in a row. And you're just like, what the fuck? Like you said, when we got married, you agreed you'd stop fucking going out with your ex on my birthday. bitch. I mean, I'm sorry, pardon my French, or like dude. Like there's a lot of shitty boyfriends out there too. A lot of shitty partners of all types and sizes.
All right, so we're
past the point. We should be past the point.
We hate
of being
all
like,
partners
are we
equally.
still rebuilding this team? Like we shouldn't even be thinking about rebuilding anymore.
That's right.
Which is why Kenny Holland probably should just, pour a Canadian club whiskey and just trade that fucking first rounder for a goalie, because in sports terms, he has a gun to his fucking head right now. Like Mikko had an amazing game last game and he played pretty well tonight, but Kenny Holland has a gun to his head in terms of like saving the season by getting a goalie.
Kenny Holland he isn't the right kind of GM to put a gun to a head.
No.
Like I think part of the problem in all of this is the fact that we hired a GM, and you talked about the fact that Bob Nicholson was interviewing Bill Zito, the GM in Florida now, and he was leading the charge until he threw the entire process out the window to go back to the old boys club and hire Holland. And I think like you said so many things over the course of this podcast that just keep like making this big red beacon on my head go off. And the fact, like I'm making notes here, he doesn't win trades. He thinks he can buy all these lottery tickets like Gaetan Haas and Perlini and whoever else that, Turris and all these things, that he doesn't make trades and win them. He goes and tries to get players and finds diamonds in the rough every so once in a while. And the ones that he doesn't, he just tosses because they weren't really worth an investment. He didn't have to give up anything to get them. We got the wrong kind of GM at the wrong fucking time. We got a guy that was supposed to develop a team and keep people in the A and let them ripen. We needed that when we hired Chiarelli. But instead we hired Chiarelli, and that was supposed to be the draft development rebuild so that we had something in place for Connor and for Leon. And now we're at a point where we've got the most patient GM in the history of GMs with a gun to his head. Like, that's a conundrum all in itself, you guys. We don't have the right GM in the right place at the right time.
I almost completely 100% agree. I will say, like, I don't think Kenny Holland is the right GM for this team at this time. I think that's something that we've only realized now.
Sure.
It's probably clear.
2020, but it doesn't.
It's probably
change
clear
the
to
point.
some earlier than that. Like, yeah, exactly. It doesn't change the point. And I think I'll go back to what I said before in terms of stopping the bleeding. Like, I think, even though Chiarelli, I mean, he didn't fucking win trades. Let's get that out of the way right now. But Chiarelli did one thing in terms of being like, oh, like you guys don't really have like proper like hockey ops department set up and a proper like farm system set up. That's a little weird. I mean, you're an NHL team, right? Like, like hockey ops and player development and having like a solid like way that you're managing your minor team is actually really important for an NHL franchise. So we did set that up, and I give Keith Gretzky a lot of credit there too, among others. So he stopped the bleeding there in a way. And I think Kenny Holland did come in and stop the bleeding in the sense that he inherited a team with Milan Lucic on the roster. He inherited a team with Mikko Koskinen freshly signed to a big fat contract. And organizationally, the High Priest of Oilers Magic at High Priest Oil, you should follow him on Twitter for the listeners if you don't, my co-host, he said like it's really been like decades where this organization has not appreciated and prioritized goaltending. Like how do we think we're not going to win in the playoffs, let alone accomplish anything else without, frankly, two really solid fucking goaltenders? You need two. And they're two of the most important players on your roster, probably the two most important players on your roster, bar none. And organizationally, I mean, sans Devin Dubnyk, who basically got rode out of town, what have we done organizationally to develop and besides that, procure our own goaltenders?
Well, we've had good goaltenders come through Edmonton. That's the thing, right? And this is, we're getting mad at Holland, we're getting mad at Tippett, we're getting mad at Nicholson. Like, the reality is it's an organizational problem, right? Like, it is a Nicholson problem. It's it goes every which way, and the reality is this. It's like everybody in the world sees trends with this team, right? And except the organization itself. And the organization sees the trend once it's not a trend anymore, once the train's already hit the station, right? Once the train's already there, like this, like right now, right? Yeah, we've won 2 in a row. Does that mean we've turned our season around? No, like, I said I don't I don't have profanity.
Not
say
even a
profanity
little bit,
lot, but
man.
yeah, exactly. It
We're
means,
still leaking defense. We're
it means
still
nothing, right?
getting.
And yet, what are we doing? Are we gonna wait until we lose 2 or 3 more before we make some kind of meaningful change to this team? Whether it's, goaltending, defense, finding somebody, like, what are we waiting on? Right? Like, what have we been waiting on for years? Right? Like, you talk about goaltending is a key thing. Like, we had Wallstedt in our sights.
Mm-hmm.
We were the bridesmaid for Markstrom, which is no defense. Like, you should have fucking given Markstrom the extra year. Like, you fucking kidding me? Rather than see him go to fucking Calgary, you didn't give Markstrom the extra year. Are you a fucking madman? Like, I'm sorry.
It wasn't the extra year. Didn't he take? I think he took 6x6 instead of 7x5.
Yeah, and
it was less years. He took less years to go to Calgary.
We had Talbot, but challenges in keeping him consistent, right? But he seems to have found that consistency when he goes someplace else, right? Like, he would at least have been a solid backup. My point being, though, is, and we've talked about it on here, is most teams wouldn't wait with their goaltending coach this long, right? Like, it's
sure.
a trend. It's a trend, right?
We can throw Dustin Schwartz under the bus.
No, you don't have to throw him under the bus. The reality is our goaltending's just not good enough. And
well, you know what I actually
and they go someplace else and they do better.
I'll tell you what I attributed it to.
Then you don't. But here's the thing, though. You don't say, hey, it's like sales, right? Like, if you hit your quota year over year, you got a job. But if you don't hit your quota, you could cry all you want to your boss that you didn't have the tools or you didn't have whatever. You're still going to be out on the street. Right.
So glad you brought this up.
This is Schwartz's quota. Schwartz's quota is to have decent goaltending, and he should be out on the street because we've not had it. And you know what? He's probably a great goaltending coach, and I've heard all sorts of things from different people on whether he's good, whether he's bad, whether it matters. But years ago, Montreal was having all of these injuries. Right. Goes back probably 15 years ago. They fired all the training staff. Right, and you
have to have a whip. You have to have heads have to roll. You need a blood sacrifice. I think that's kind of what that's kind of how I read the Schwartz stuff. Like, whether or not Dustin Schwartz is the best or the worst or in the middle of goaltending coaches. Exactly. This is the thing. This is part of the microscope of being a Canadian market. This is part of the microscope of being Edmonton. Mm-hmm. We always have to find someone to blame. Like, I don't know if you guys watch Kids in the Hall. There's a great sketch called Who's to Blame. Search YouTube for Kids in the Hall, search Who's to Blame. And really, like, one of the only ways that we're able to have a catharsis as Oilers fans through all the frustration is to find something to blame. And that's actually, once we find someone to blame, we actually get some kind of release. Now, in terms of goaltending, what I would attribute a big part of the problem to is it's a microscope market. So everything I said about having to find a different kind of player to come to the market applies tenfold for a goaltender. A goaltender that wants to come to a Canadian market and can handle being under the microscope of a Canadian market. Being a goaltender is a crazy fucking endeavor. You have to be half insane. You have to be like a race car driver mentality to be a goaltender. Someone who's driven by ambition and wild passions and gets caught up in the moment and lives for a thrill. Right. So doing that shit under a microscope has got to be next to fucking impossible. You know what I mean? And in a way, and I'm glad you brought this up, because I actually think, as much as I criticize Vancouver Canucks fans for various property crimes and other sins, one thing they're amazing at, and one thing we saw on display tonight, is they're amazing at cheering for their goaltender. They have a lot of practice at it, and they cheered like hell for their goaltender tonight in a way that Oilers fans have never demonstrated they're capable of. And I think, I kind of said to the High Priest on our last episode, I don't really buy the whole, like, there's always this storyline that, the team is playing their backup goaltender, or they're playing their third string, fourth string, 20th string goaltender. The Oilers have a great chance to win this. And every time I hear that, I just think to myself, well, guaranteed that goaltender is going to have a great game, because that's what happens every time I hear someone say that. Literally, I don't know if it's ever happened otherwise. So, of course, he looked great. I don't even know his name. What was his fucking name? The Vancouver goalie, McKinnon or Skinner or
Miller?
Miller.
No, it was.
I mean, he looked like insane.
Anyway,
he was like running out of the
Yeah,
net, like some guy, like some Phillies goalie from the 70s, and doing all kinds of crazy shit. You know, like playing the puck. It's. Martin. I can't remember what my original point was, but someone feel free to jump in.
Yeah.
Just,
so I mean, you said a couple of things. One is
cheer for that. Like we can't cheer for the goalie in a way that makes it easy to be a goalie. I mean, let alone for.
But I
like
think we've
Koskinen.
cheered for goalies. I mean, we cheered Talbot when he was making the last playoff run with us, right? Like we, I think you cheer goalies when they start pulling. Like the thing Edmonton hasn't had, in 15 years.
They haven't developed the goals. That's the real problem.
Yeah, we haven't, and Dash has done the work on that to tell you that the only way you win is through development of goalies, and we haven't done that. And so that's that's an organizational thing for one, right? Like it has to start somewhere, and
trying to have a hockey team without doing that is just batshit crazy.
Yeah.
Here, let me jump into that, Michael. Let me tell you what I found out. So Isaac, go back to all the Stanley Cup winners. Starting last year, all like Tampa, and keep going back. You have to go all the way back to Patrick Waugh to find a Stanley Cup winning goaltending where the team did not develop that goalie in-house. There's two in the last 30x years. Tim Thomas and Patrick Waugh. Of all the Flurries, of all the Crawfords, of all the Vasilevskis, of all the Murrays, every single one of them was a homegrown goalie. So you want to talk about how much this organization has overlooked goaltending? Look no further than that, my friend.
I mean, exactly. And that makes perfect sense to me. Like trying to have a hired gun come in to be your goalie. One thing
everybody said, we're going to bring in Hulak or Goodobin.
Exactly.
Like, what is that really
but like, did Napoleon hire like mercenaries to fight his wars? No, he completely reformed and modernized the French military into a force unknown to human civilization up to that point. An army that could move fast, an army that didn't just desert at 10% a year, no matter what you fucking did. An army that could outmarch the opposition. You can't bring in a goalie. You can't hire mercenaries to win your war. You need to be developing that shit from the ground up. And maybe Schwartz is part of that problem, but really it comes down to drafting and development. Like, I don't know, what have other franchises done to draft and develop great goaltenders?
Yeah,
Are there examples we can look
We've had guys that have been drafted and developed.
I can answer that.
Yeah, and then Craig McTavish said, if you have to ask the question, then you know the answer, and then Dubnyk was done. Like, Dubnyk could still be the fucking starting goaltender for the Oilers if we didn't run him out of town. That's entirely within the realm of possibility. I mean, whatever.
He was on spin checklist. He never got one single offer. Not a minimum wage offer this year. Not one single offer.
Yeah, but I mean, signing as a goaltender, there's only 64 jobs, right? So being on that bubble, that's a big bubble. There's a big bubble for those guys. I don't know. It's such a kind of schizophrenic position to try and like understand, but I 100% agree. Like,
who was our goaltending coach when we had JDD in?
I don't know, man. I mean, fuck.
We've had goalies come through the system. They just, we've never. Well,
we need to draft better goalies then. If that's the, you know what I mean. I mean, I don't really know. That's the other thing. There's no real logic around drafting goalies right now. It used to be, hey, we'll draft Rick DiPietro like super high. Yeah, draft a goalie super high. It's awesome. And then teams just kind of stopped doing that. But also, it's like this question mark. Like, I don't know who was the top drafted goalie last year, probably like 15th, 16th overall, something like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then finding places.
Sebastian Casa.
And then finding places for your goalies to play is like a weird thing. The whole psychology of being a goaltender is kind of its own thing. I think they probably need like fucking hire 3 goaltender coaches or 3 people that are involved in goaltending development. Cause it's there's 2 goaltenders and it's also one of the most specialized positions available in the realm of employment, let alone sports. Like being an NHL goaltender, like what was going through Nikolai Habibulin's mind when they were drilling holes in the bottom of his skates. So
don't pull over. Don't pull over.
And he just finished like 10 pots of coffee pregame and like 2 packs of cigarettes. And he was just like, where's this fucking team that I'm playing for? I don't know. I'm Nikolai Habibulin. I don't give a shit. Like, can you imagine if like a Brizgalov came on this team? Like, speaking of a specific type of player, we almost need like a Brizgalov-esque personality in a weird way. like someone who's just
well,
on like a whole different level.
Mike Smith is on a whole
Mike Smith
different
is
level.
kind of in that mode. Unfortunately, we're getting him at the
know,
twilight of his career, you know.
And he's
Mike,
injured
totally
all the time.
great point. Mike Smith is exactly my point. Mike Smith brought so much. So much.
You alluded to the fact that there's some sort of mystery in developing goalies, though, and I believe you to some certain extent, Isaac. But at the end of the day, like, look at the success of Ben Weil there in New York, and Sean Burke in Arizona, and it didn't matter with the Rangers whether it was Henrik Lundqvist, Antti Ranta, Cam Talbot, Shesterkin, Georgiev, you name it. Look at Arizona as a goaltending factory. That's not an accident.
Oh, for sure. And I totally agree. And we're definitely organizationally behind the other great powers. I mean, really, like almost like the whole fucking.
But it all boils down to one thing. Organizationally, we're behind in a lot of areas.
We're like the Ottoman Empire,
goaltending is
man.
one of them. Yeah, absolutely.
It's like we're not going to inevitably decline. We're just not progressing at the velocity we need to be competitive with the 19th century.
I asked a question though the other day to people, like, if like saying, hey, I've thought about not cheering for this team a whole bunch of times in my life because I was just fed up, right, in the last 15 years. And they're empty promises, but is that the challenge with this organization? Is it that people will continue to buy tickets no matter what they do, right? That it's never bad enough that people will stop caring about the Oilers. Whereas, well, I mean, clearly it doesn't matter in Arizona or Florida.
What do you think, Dash?
I mean, I don't know the answer either.
Like, Schwartz is a disciple of these guys. He comes from the school of the head trajectory and everything that these guys teach. So the success isn't there the same way it is with his mentors. So I don't know. There's something missing, guys. I mean, we're behind in analytics. We're behind in goaltending scouting. We've historically been behind in amateur scouting. We've historically been behind in professional scouting. We've lucked out getting Connor McDavid, and Buffalo not taking Draisaitl.
Absolutely. That's another thing High Priest Oil pointed out. Like, it's not as though this team was built. We just fucking sucked really bad for a long time and lucked into some great players. Like,
amen, High Priest.
It's still taking some time. Like, I don't know, man. Like, I've thought of, like, when you mentioned cheering for other teams, like, if Evander Kane signs with the Oilers, the High Priest is going to quit the show. So I might have to stop doing Handkerchief Dynasty. And I've proposed my next podcast might be called Dynasty of the Sun, and it'll be a Florida hockey podcast, mostly focused on the Panthers, a little bit of checking in with the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Gators. Go Gators. Like, honestly, if the organization doesn't realize how precarious things are, and like, this season is so fucking important right now. Like, at least if they don't make the playoffs, they at least have to have a good innings, so to speak, as the British would say. If they don't at least make a game of it, I think Nicholson's gone. I think Kenny Holland has to potentially be gone. And Tippett, his contract will be done by then. So who the fuck cares? The thing about Tippett that I love is he's one of the few coaches that actually kind of still coaches a team after he's gone. We called it ghost coach on the podcast. Like, the Arizona Coyotes still kind of played Dave Tippett hockey after he left for a little while. So even if we have another coach, I don't know, Jay Woodcroft would be a prime candidate, I think. We'll still have a little bit of the, like, +1 to agility from the Dave Tippett years. And I got no personal animus towards Dave Tippett. Like, even if we lose, I mean, God forbid, say we lose another 5 games after this, I think we're actually going to go on a streak. Maybe Kenny Holland will actually look at the gun to his head and actually fire Tippett. But
so here's the other thing.
Problem.
Is this team going to be so happy?
Anything.
Are we going to be so happy that we just made the playoffs that if we're out again in the first round, that we're all right with that?
Well, that's where we're headed. So.
Yeah,
it's kind of like,
to your question that I skirted an hour ago.
Yeah,
that's where we're headed, Michael.
I mean,
if we make the playoffs, we're out in the first round. We don't have the defense. We don't have the depth. We don't have the defensive acumen right now to be able to do anything in a consistent way in a hockey game. We're outscoring our mistakes when we win. Bottom line.
Yeah, it's not like
giving up the first goal. Like, giving up the first. If we go down 2-0 in the playoffs, I'm sorry, gentlemen, but that's not a winning strategy in the fucking
17.
NHL playoffs.
16 of the last 17 games, 20 5 out of 29 now, guys.
It's beyond a story.
I think we've gone down 2-0, like 8 out of the last 10.
Well, and the two games we just won, guys.
At this point.
The 2 games we just won.
We came back from 2-0.
Well, it doesn't matter, like even that. But the 2 games we just won are against non-playoff teams right now, right? The 2 games,
and Calgary
the
kicked
2
the
games,
shit out of us,
and
guys.
the 2 games
Calgary
prior to
took it
that,
to us.
the 2 games we won prior, the last 4 games that we've won are against non-playoff teams, and then anytime we've played anybody that's half good, they've beat us. And some of those non-playoff teams have beat us, like Ottawa and Seattle beat us before the break. This is right now. This team's not good enough. This goes back to this where their team is trending, and yet we're still waiting for something to hit us in the square in the face to say it's time to make a move.
We're waiting. We're at the casino looking at the slot machine. You know what I mean? And before the shit drops, it's question marks, right? So we've huge question mark at goal. We have a huge question mark, quite frankly, still, although I think it's not necessarily that far off, of having a third line. The Oilers are not going to be a playoff team year in, year out until they have a third fucking line. I'm sorry. However it materializes, that has to be a thing. And then we have question marks at defense. So we're looking at 3 question marks. And I'll give you some answers to some of those question marks. Someone like a McLeod, a Holloway, a Benson, a Burgo, Lavoie could become the answer at forward, somehow be the straw that stirs the drink on something, or we play Nuge at third line center, or whatever the fuck. That might happen. Or we acquire a player. At defense, maybe Duncan Keith turns it on and plays like a man possessed. Maybe CC goes from being totally steady Eddie, above average, totally happy to have him at that number. Maybe he steps it up and actually starts to put some points up. Maybe Bouchard starts to iron out some of the rough edges to his defensive game and continues to advance his development on the offensive side of the game. Maybe Broberg comes up next year and somehow is able to be better than Bouchard in that he can contribute with driving the play north, but avoid some of the pitfalls of having failings on his defensive side. But those are a lot of maybes. And Ken Holland, or whoever the GM is in the next little bit, probably needs to look at some moves to address some of those shortcomings. And if they're not addressing also the deficiencies in their development system, a la goaltending or whatever the fuck else, I mean, they're moving forward at their own peril, because we'll find the next person to blame, and eventually it will be them.
Well,
that's one thing that's
you've talked about that, right? Like that we're always looking for a sacrifice. I've got zero problem with that, by the way. I mean, in any other business, if the shit's not going the right way, people lose their job, right? Like, it's the nature of business, and this should be looked at the exact same way. If it's not, this whole, we've had 7 coaches in however long, I don't give a shit. If it's not going the right way, then you get another one, right? Like there are successful organizations that are built on next man up, right? Like this is.
If you're willing to pay 2 coaches at the same time, Michael.
Yeah, well, and that's part of it, I'm sure. But anyway, guys, I'll say my last word, and then maybe Dash, you can.
Did we go 99 minutes? Does the 99 Forever podcast go 99 minutes?
Yeah.
That part. By the way, Dash, I should say really quick before we finish, I'll totally come on your show if you want later this week or whatever, or you can come on mine. We should work it out. I just followed you online, so let's get on Mike soon, and then we won't have to give Mike the dearth of airtime.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, really, he just kind of filled it with gas, anyways.
That's right.
No.
Yeah.
Honestly,
so I was going to say
this podcast is more together than 99% of the podcasts I've participated in my life. So I'm just happy to be here. I'm like Brendan Perlini. I'm just super, super stoked that I get to go on the plane and not on the bus.
You scored a couple goals early, and now it's been a struggle.
Perlini could be a guy. I mean, that's the other thing.
We're not getting into it.
Preseason.
We're way past the point of the podcast that we can get into that. I was going to say, Shannon on Facebook, who's still tuned in, he said, management's used COVID and injuries for an excuse when we go out in the first round. this is my last word, because, we're talking about, sort of the theme for me tonight has been, management, everything, the organization not seeing trends as they happen. And the challenge is I don't think Holland sees the trend. If we look at his last presser, what he went on to say was, all the woulda, shoulda, couldas, right? Like that happened. Like we were in that game until this happened, right? We were, COVID was the reason we didn't get past the first round, right? Or, it was a really close series against the Jets, and it could have went either way, and we had, some overtimes. And the reality is that's, Holland's looking at this as, we've got the team, we're just not getting the puck luck, right? And so I don't think he sees the trend, right? I don't think he fully sees the trend. He thinks he's got all the right tools in place. He just needs to get a little bit of puck luck. And we know that, that's, hope's not a strategy, right? And so that's, in my mind, that's where he's at. That's why, I'm not expecting a whole lot. I will cheer to the end. I'm a fan. Right, I'll cheer to the end, and I want them to make the playoffs. But I've said it quite clearly on here. My expectation is we're not getting there, and it's a sad fact for me. But maybe I'm like you, Mr. Professor. I'm trying to emotionally remove myself from the potential and possibility.
It's a brilliant move by you. I completely commend you for it. Like, honestly, it's a coping mechanism that probably, if most of
Why don't you talk to me like that, Dash? Why don't you talk to me like that, Dash? Brilliant move. I need more of that.
I said you were my best friend today. That wasn't enough.
That's right. What the hell do we?
What else do you need from me, Michael?
Now what are we changing to here?
So I changed to the Tree of Woe from Conan the Barbarian because you invoked like you're not clinging to the the like strings of hope for the season. Still, I still think we got like a 2 in 10, a 2.5 in 10 chance of still making the playoffs here, because the Oilers are kind of a magical team, and we saw that early on. And if we can get Hyman back on the PK, if Nuge can be back on the PK, if Kenny Holland can get some more players, we just need a couple more players, and it might make a huge difference. We saw what a couple more players made, what a difference it made early in the season with Hyman and Fogle, and actually having we actually had a third line, we thought, for a little while, until Ryan totally went MIA. I think the Edmonton Police Service are still looking for him, but you know what I mean? I still have some hope.
Oscar Clefbaum's coming back. All right, Dash, take us home. You know the rules. Dash gets the last word. I want to thank you again for joining us, Mr. Professor. You can find Handkerchief Dynasty just by searching Handkerchief Dynasty. You find them on iTunes, Google, wherever you get podcasts. Great bunch of guys. And Dash, of course, with Straight Off the Pipe right here on the Heavy Hockey Network. Thanks so much. Everybody have a great night. Dash, take us home.
All right. I got a little bit of a dog's breakfast to close out here, because I was making notes and I thought I had some things to say, but, so here we go. Okay. First things first, I think Clef may come back. If that happens, there's a small chance. If that happens, let's just call ourselves Tampa Bay this year, because we'll bring back Clef and Nuge and off the LTIR, and we can just kind of hold those guys off right until playoffs, and then we'll just take an extra $10 million into the playoffs. That's the answer. Anyways, just kidding. I'm surprised you gave me the last word based on the vocabulary that I'm up against here. When we talk about Napoleon's army and quantum singularity and collateralized frozen assets and Dante's Inferno West Hell.
Well, part of that is I'm drunk and high. So
that's
why they call me the Secret Professor. That's actually that's why I started the podcast, because a friend of mine said to me, he was visiting in Vancouver, and I was saying, I kind of want to start an Oilers podcast. Like, I've been listening to some, and I think I could be good at it. He was like, your name should be the Secret Professor, because you're always saying all this random shit that's like kind of crazy. And it's like, what is this guy? Some kind of fucking secret professor? But
yeah, vocabulary is wrapped in an enigma, wrapped in a mystery, wrapped in a lexicon of some kind.
Oh, you said lexicon. I was literally about to say the word lexicon. Okay, high five. We got to come on each other's show in the next
All right. We can lexicon away on Straight Off the Pipe. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it really just made me realize that, when you were reading Sir Isaac Newton and Hemingway, I was probably reading double digit issues of the Archie comics, but that's okay.
I was watching Seinfeld. Like, honestly, I've read like 2 books in the last 10 years, believe it or not. I'm like, I'm really good at sounding. I've read like Wikipedia a lot of times. I'm just like, oh, okay.
Well, if Evander Kane ends up being the Trojan horse to the handkerchief dynasty and the priest quits, then maybe you and I can start the Handkerchief Diaries, and we'll go that way, because Hebert is
all right,
about how he
bring us
fires
home.
people in business.
We got to get Leonardo DiCaprio involved.
So.
If we start doing Handkerchief Diaries, we got to get Leonardo DiCaprio involved for sure. Yeah, I mean, Mike, it's like we said we'd go for an hour. We've gone for, I think, 99 minutes. We're torturing Mike. It's like 3:45 in Newfoundland. Where are you exactly?
I'm gonna shut it down. Shut it down here. Come on, Dash. Say what. Let Dash get the last word in here, and then we'll shut it down. Go ahead.
It's okay. I think I told the boss of the network that he's full of hot air. So this might be my last podcast on Heavy Hockey Network. Anyways, good night, everyone. Hope to see you soon.
Thanks for listening, and all. Talk to you soon.
Oilerslive